Podcasting is more than just talking. It's listening. BSing with Bob Schmidt.
Ever thought of the expression, it starts with you, creating positive ripples? Jantzen is the creator of CPR Revolution, Creating Positive Ripples Revolution. I've known Jackson for a long time, and Jackson says, today's a new day. It requires bravery in the face of fear, compassion, and love in the face of anger and hate. It's his desire to create a strong community and support of inspiration, to energize a collection of individuals seeking to make a tangible, positive impact. Those words there, Jackson, say a lot. How can we all create positive ripples and a positive ripple revolution?
For me, this started a lot of years ago when I had this moment of crisis in my life. And I got an opportunity to really find out who my friends were, and then find out who the people I thought would be there for me in a crisis, how many of those weren't. And so in those moments, after all was said and done, I was reflecting and realized that I had a lot of people in my life to be thankful for. And I really made an effort for our window of time to let each person know what an incredible positive ripple they had made in my life. Some knew it, some didn't, some had no clue, but it let them know that they made a difference for me. I recognize, how often we have these moments in a day where we engage with the world, and we are moving and speaking and engaging with other individuals, and we're using our own filters, and oftentimes we're not necessarily focusing on how we can be the best person in that moment. And so I, over the last many years, I've looked at my career and started looking at potential professional transitions and started looking, how can I do this more in my life and in my career? So found my way into a nonprofit setting where I got to meet so many more people and have so many more people coming into my life who were really working to be the best version of themselves in the world. And it was a profound thing for me because I had been in a lot of corporate environments and other environments where, there's a way of behaving that is expected, but, our idea of engaging in positive, having good positive engagement or creating positive ripples, that's not necessarily what you encounter all of the time in those environments. And so having an opportunity to have a regular engagement and interaction with individuals from the community that I might not have normally connected with, it really taught me a lot about the pieces of humanity that we don't get a lot to hear a lot about through our media or other things. And I really began to think about what might happen if we could find a way to help these people connect with one another who are committed to living their lives in a way where they are working to create positive ripples every day in their lives for people, not only for themselves, but for the people in their communities, for the people in their lives. And CPR Revolution became that thing for me to try to find those people and create those connections.
Jackson, do you think that positive ripples are possible in everybody's life?
I do. And I quite honestly, I think that for me personally, this project has been more of a personal journey of healing for me than anything else up to this point. Because the more that I have thought about what creates some of the problems that we have, whether it be because of our lack of ability to communicate with one another, hear each other, listen to one another, those types of things are at a deficit oftentimes. I do think positive ripples are something that every person can do, and it's a personal commitment that has to be made. Gandhi said, "Be the change that you want to see in the world." There is so much wisdom there for centuries. There's wisdom out there to this effort and to this way of living, but culturally, we've been conditioned to believe that can't exist in our current culture and circumstances.
In the amount of time that I've known you for a couple of years, I know that you've changed quite a bit, that you've got a lot more positive about yourself, I think. I think that you have grown as a leader. I think that that you've had the opportunity, I think, to come out of your shell more or less. Because I remember the very first time that I interviewed you, which was probably 4 or 5 years ago, and how nervous you were. You know, you walked into the studio, and honest to God, Jackson, you were. I mean, you look like a scared sheep. You know, you were. And then now look at you now. You've started the CPR Revolution. You're out talking to people. You're getting in front of groups. You're changing lives. You, Jackson, are being the positive ripple in people's lives.
You know, and I appreciate that validation, and you're serving as a witness in that regard. I appreciate that, because I think that for all of us, life is a series of lessons, and we're here to learn and improve as human beings. And that's my philosophy. And it's not always easy. You know, our comfort zones get to us, and once we find a really good comfort zone that works for us, it's hard to push ourselves outside of that.
Can I stop you there for just 1 second? Because I think that's exactly what I think a lot of people have a hard time doing, because we all seem to get stuck into our comfort zone. And once we're in that comfort zone, we don't want to let go of the proverbial life jacket, if you will. And,
right.
Out of all the people that I know and all the people that I've talked to, Jackson, you're that person that's kind of throwing that life jacket off to the side and kind of pushed it away.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's for me, taking a position as an executive director of a nonprofit was a huge step, because I had always aspired. I'd done management in corporate environments and whatnot, so I had gotten to work with people a lot. But this was the first gig that I had where I was responsible for all of the functioning of a organization. But I also had this feeling or understanding that I knew that I had a lot of limitations to being able to do that job. And I had a lot of fears about being in front of people. I'm trans. And so growing up as a gender nonconforming female, I found the world to be really hostile. And for a major part of my life, worked really hard to be invisible to other people because I didn't want to take crap from them. And so becoming the executive director of the center pushed a couple of things for me, because it forced me to overcome some of my fears around, engaging in public speaking and things like that. But it also, because there were so many rewards in engaging and embracing my fears and trying to overcome them, it just became easier and easier to do. And so the last couple of years, and especially over the last year, I've been working really hard. If something scares me, we have two kinds of fear, right? We have the fear that we should run because we're about to be eaten by the lion. Or, we have fears that are our ego's response to us because, it puts us outside of our comfort zone. And I'm not talking about, standing face to face with a lion, but, I'm talking about standing face to face with all of those times where your ego is telling you that you don't want to be you don't want to be mocked, or you don't want to, be disliked, or like all of these negative things that keep us from engaging in the world in some way. And each time that those things have arisen, I have tried to have a mindfulness about it so that I can step into the fear and I can either fail and learn from it or overcome it and feel a little bit stronger.
Jackson, there's so many people that are so negative. How do you end up turning that negative into a positive, or, deal with when somebody is not being the nicest or the most, the most welcoming to you?
And honestly, this is a work in progress for me, because this also goes with judgment. I found myself having to work both on my judgment, because we're human beings. We've learned through living that we need to come up with judgments and just so that we can assess our situations. But oftentimes those end up going into, we frame judgments around people so that we're compartmentalizing them and putting them into boxes before we know anything about them. And so I've really, part of this for me was realizing how many judgments I had, because it's an ongoing process. But recognizing where those are, and then trying to work through my own judgments. Because the more that I do that, there are people. We're having this conversation about being the change and having positive ripples. And it's not realistic to think that 100% of humanity is ever going to get to the place where, oh, I'm going to get be a good person, because I know that will create a better society and a better culture. We've got a lot of people that are really attached to, power and pain and hate and anger. And those are not the folks that I am really seeking to expend the energy on right now. I'm making the conscious decision that if there's somebody who is looking just to come at me to have a fight, for me, I've given myself permission to walk away. And I have a desire to engage, but I want to have a respectful dialogue. I want to understand the difference that people are coming with, the difference in thought, the difference in ideas, the difference in opinion. But unless all parties in the conversation are interested in hearing and listening to one another and having a shared engagement, so that the whole purpose is to the two people or however many people involved are connecting and understanding one another, those are the times that I want to engage. And somebody can be angry and frustrated, but if they are willing to be present in that space, they are at least compartmentalizing the anger for a time being, so that they can try to be in a place of conversation. So for me, it's how, when I'm engaging, how much does that other person really want to engage? How much do they really want to be a partner in the conversation? And then I'm making an assessment as to how I'm going to engage based on that. When you and I talked, the multiple times when I was living in La Crosse, I was trying to figure out how to organize community around this. What this has now become for me is I realize that I can't really organize community. What I have to do is organize individuals who are wanting to take control of the reality that they're experiencing.
Or I wonder if you just do more yourself, and then like-minded people will follow, Right,
exactly. And so part of this, though, is that the part of it is that the people who are looking to abuse their illusions, and looking to challenge the way that they've always looked at the world and thought about the world. And when I started thinking about the people that are doing that, it's really hard to kind of organize around that when you're trying to tell people, I want you to be unique individuals who resist the norms, and the way that we've been told that we should do this and engage. And, it's really hard to both organize and seek those folks out. So I began to look at it more from the perspective of, how do I talk about my path and my journey and the lessons I'm learning in doing this, and then hopefully be able to draw other people who are already doing that work as well into the conversation, so that we can help each other develop and improve the way that we're engaging in the world personally, and then from there we can build the bridges.
Right. Well, you mentioned normal. Is there really such a thing as normal?
Well, I think that we have norms that we're expected to live into. It's like, and when I again, so nuanced, but like, I'll talk about one of the norms. I think about like LGBT people or gay people, and when we talk about like the norms that you and I were raised into, is a family was normed. Most times families were normed into treating people like shit in order to save their souls, or in order to normalize them for society so that their life wouldn't feel so hard. And instead of saying, okay, we are the few people in this world that this person can count on, we are going to show them unconditional love and support them, but instead people come into the world and be like, I've got to fit into these boxes. And so even though I tell myself that I'm all about love and compassion, I'm treating this person like shit because I want them to have a better experience in the world and be a stronger, tougher person, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so we sell out ourselves as far as our empathy, our compassion, our sense of love and being a decent person. We sell out all of those things so that we can better fit into society in the hateful ways society has framed our culture.
Well, do you think then that ties into back to judgment then?
It does tie for me. That has taken me to judgment, because I realize that the judgment piece is what has really kind of it stops us in our tracks from even stepping into a new situation. So when I first started thinking about a lot of this project for me was like, well, these are things are really screwed up. It's like, what can I do? Like, where's the root cause to this, to fixing these things? And so, like, as I was looking for myself as what is the root cause for me not stepping out of my comfort threshold and going into other communities that I'm not familiar with? Where, it's like sometimes fear paralyzes me from doing things that I should be doing to either engage the world or build bridges.
I really think that everybody has that. I think that everybody goes through and they're paralyzed by the crap that society throws at you. It doesn't matter if you're going to talk in front of a group of people that you know, that you don't know, a group of your family members, a group of anybody, I think.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly it. And how often do people on the regular have help getting through that? And how often is it easier to stay in that fear and feed your ego and say, okay, I'm just not going to do anything that I should be doing right now because it's more comfortable to not engage. And, and how often that paralyzes us. And again, I have to, like, all of these things I'm talking about, I'm thinking about them as complexities of us as human beings and what I think most of us do experience. But I'm very clear as to, I need to talk about this from my own personal experience, because I don't want to sound judgy. I don't want people to sound like I'm trying to convert or that I'm trying to preach or anything else. And so when I'm talking about this, I'm really trying. I've been trying to focus on first person narratives and telling my story or telling my experience, because I also don't want to make assumptions that other people are experiencing exactly the same thing I am, because we've all had completely different experiences of the world just because of the way that our lives unfold.
Well, that actually brings me to another point, because earlier on in the conversation you mentioned that you're gender nonconformist female. Is that the correct way of saying it? That you were?
Yeah.
So what does that mean to somebody that doesn't know?
So, I was born and assigned female at birth, and for me, trying to fit into our gender norms of what female is supposed to look like, it from the time that I could walk, I never fit into the box as well. And I was not feminine. I was very gender nonconforming. And when I would walk the streets as a kid, I repeatedly dealt with people going out of their way to ask me if I was a boy or a girl. So that is the gender nonconforming piece. So I kind of grew up in the society being told that I needed to conform to what it meant and looked like and how a female should act like. Yet at the entire time, my entire internal embodiment was male and felt male. And so it was this disconnect. So
do you think that pushed you toward starting Creative Positive Ripples and the revolution?
I would have to say that every moment of my life, it's in the last year, again, I've had some tremendous opportunities for personal reflection and growth. And I spent a lot of my life looking at my life as this series of painful experiences, and life in general just kind of felt like a punishment. And I began reflecting and thinking, okay, how do I move forward so that it doesn't feel like that? And but I had to look at my past and look at all of those pieces. And as I reflected on those really problematic, frustrating, painful experiences that I had for the first, most of my life up until this point, there was this moment where it was like almost a perfect alignment where every negative thing, I could see how that happened and how it led me to a lesson or to understanding my strength or to understanding my courage or understanding my ability to overcome. And so it's hard for me to say that any one thing leads to this. Everything in my life has led to the moment of realizing that I needed to walk this path.
So, Jackson, how can we personally create positive ripples?
Right now, I'm thinking that everything starts off with trying to be self-reflective and figure out where we are in it, where individually every one of us is engaging and the good things that are happening and then really kind of identifying and looking at how maybe we're not creating the positive ripple so that we can start to change that. Those are the first steps. And then the next step becomes trying to figure out how to start conversations and talk to one another. And that's going to be a big step for me going forward as I begin to talk about this, because that is a huge component. I think that a lot of us think that we are listening to and hearing one another when we are not. And we make assumptions because of the way that we've experienced the world.
Right.
We hear what people say, we take it in, and we make it fit our realities. But rarely I'm witnessing our are individuals very consciously focused on trying to understand the person in front of them and trying to understand what it is that they're saying and what they mean and what their truest intention behind that. And until we can find and monitor the way that we are listening, I don't even know how to start those conversations. So that's one of the very first things that I have been reflecting on and trying to figure out how to improve is my listening and my ability to communicate, and then trying to start conversations with others so that we can explore ways to improve that within a community of people that are really interested in building that space of conversation.
You know, Jackson, I've been reading some of the stuff on your blog, and you notice some of the simple things in life that actually have made impact in things like expecting peace is childish. You wrote that, but as I read that piece, I think that the title is different than what the actual saying of the piece is.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I meant that on purpose because I wanted it to be a double meaning, because, you know, I think that we are really attached to peace, but at the same time, we don't give it. We only honor it when it comes in the embodiment of children oftentimes, and we mock adults when they're talking about trying to live that. And honestly, I'm not a scholar, so I'm not going to try to say why we do that as individuals. But it is troubling. So I really wanted to talk about that, and I feel like there's this basic wisdom, and sometimes it feels like bumper sticker wisdom that we have been given generation after generation. And in some cases, I felt like I have internalized it almost as a joke or mockery in some cases, and I know that I've experienced our culture doing that.
When you said bumper sticker, I automatically thought of, well, bumper sticker, Twitter, Facebook. I mean, we're all just throwing stuff out there as much as we can in kind of hopes of being either somebody reading, liking, or commenting on stuff that we happen to witness.
Yeah. Well, and I think that for me there was this internal shift that needed to happen, because when I say that bumper sticker wisdom, it's this wisdom that makes us feel really good. We're like, oh yeah, that's great, that's a great idea, that's a great philosophy, how nice, And it's like if it were like this kumbaya kind of.
Hey, here's a ribbon.
If I don't have to do any work and we can just have that happen, let's do that. And so. That's what I meant. And for my life, I was trying to get to this place of having a deeper understanding of it. But I was really connected to the bumper sticker wisdom. But at the same time, it's like if you don't have the deeper intention to or understanding to it, that you're connecting it with your actions, then the bumper sticker wisdom is just, it doesn't do anything if it's just attached to the back of your car and you're not having actions related to implementing it, right? And so I think that in the last year, I've really been focusing and looking at that connection of are the actions there to support the rhetoric, the words, and also I'm really trying to reflect more so on how do I speak with my actions.
Right. Well, you mentioned earlier about the communication side. Do you think that maybe if we listen to one another and listen to each other and actually listened to what somebody said, that we would actually start to create positive ripples on our own just by listening? Absolutely,
because one of the pieces that I've been really trying to figure out how to write, or I want to get some input from other people, because I would be really interested to see how many people, if I told them, would feel like they are really, really hurt. And what I mean is not you're sitting in a meeting and you say, oh, let's get a different kind of coffee for the coffee pot in the break room. It's not like that. It's feeling like when you speak, people are engaging to hear and understand what you're saying. I know that I don't feel that very often, and I've got some amazing people that are really good at communicating. Yet at the same time, we get caught up in our lives and in what's going on and our perceptions of what's going on, and have a hard time just letting that person know that they're seen and heard. I mean, and if we begin just letting those people in our lives know that they're seen and heard by us, that gives them strength and gives them a sense of connection. And from there, you're able to build beyond the people that are in your current life.
Where do you see creating?
So I think it's really important.
Where do you see creating positive ripples and the revolution? Where do you see that in 5, 10, 100 years from now?
I'm reflecting on this as I just started talking about this as a thought project that I have. It is something that I have craved as far as finding community and people who are similarly interested in engaging in the world. And I would love to think that this could create a space for people as they decide that the way that they're living in the world just is not working for them anymore, and they want to change. This type of engagement really takes practice, and it takes being around people that are willing to let you mess up and that are willing to see your humanity and support you in that. And so for me, one or two people could be drawn to this, or 100,000 people could be drawn to this. But it doesn't matter as long as the people that are drawn to it are finding that connection to other people that helps them feel like they are building skills and learning and have people in their as a community that will support them in that. That becomes critical. And for me, if I can connect with a couple of people that say these connections have changed my life and have helped me really rethink how I'm moving in the world, then, or have supported me in that practice. Because, some people, I know that there's a lot of people that are already doing that. My ideal is just to create a space so that we can kind of support each other and learn from each other in how to do things better, right? And so when you were asking me before about the communication piece, me being part of the LGBT community has been a huge piece, a learning curve for that, because we have learned through trying to educate the public that our personal stories and that people being able to see that human face is a huge factor in moving the dial on issues and gaining understanding. So I can't imagine why that wouldn't work with every other issue that we have. And when I think about things, the biggest issues that we have, I think it boils down to our basic inability to connect and communicate with one another, our disinterest in trying to understand the issues comprehensively and complexly. And also being willing to get out of our comfort zones in case, the answers don't necessarily fit, with what our perceptions of things should be, and being willing to even exist in that if somebody doesn't agree with us or whatever,
Absolutely. Well, I think that it doesn't matter if you're in the LGBTQ community or the any other community. I think that there's always going to be people out there that are naysayers that don't have the same thoughts or beliefs that you do, and you just kind of have to power through those things. I think that everybody has to deal with with things like that. How, Jackson? How do you expect to grow the CPR revolution?
It's so far this has been an intuitive journey. I did a video last November in which I started to think about this, but I still hadn't wrapped my arms around the complexity of the directions that it could go. And so for me in the beginning, right now, it's just I'm trying to talk about some of the things that I've been witnessing around the communication piece and our personal commitments to responsibility, or personal responsibility to engagement. And then once I'm able to have more conversations like this with people and really kind of loop people in to the deeper idea behind it, then we will see where things will go. Ideally, I would like to be able to bring in other voices to be able to promote on the website. But then we're also trying to find ways to create a template or a toolkit that people will be able to download so that people can create meeting spaces in their own communities and ideally have these physical spaces that people can come to and have weekly conversations or monthly conversations depending upon the desires.
Do you see this being a worldwide revolution, or within the states, or within your state, within a different community?
I don't think that the dysfunction in the U.S. is really just ours alone. So I really think that this is something that could resonate with anybody in any country. This is a combination of philosophies and values that I think that most human beings hold in one way, shape, or form. And whether or not people's desires to do the work themselves to do it more regularly or might vary, but I do think it could be worked. I think with technology and the internet, that makes really anything possible now. For me, I'm just trying to look at getting it off the ground and staying local right now is where it is. But if people from other countries found the blog and wanted to contribute, that would be amazing.
You know, one of the ways, because I think you and I spoke about this a couple of years ago when you were first kind of coming up with the idea, and I've always thought of the creating positive ripples as if somebody took a rock and threw it into the water, and the ripples that it creates, because every action has a reaction. And
absolutely,
and that's how I picture this. I mean, is that kind of your thoughts on it also, or is that just the way that I interpreted it?
That's totally it. For the ripples from that perspective, that's a great visual. For me, it came about because, again, from realizing the impacts that other people's actions had on me, and thus I was able to have on others because they had supported me and lifted me up in a moment. And for me, it became just a common practice of, like almost like a daily meditative practice of, okay, if I'm leaving the house today, I can decide that I'm going to be a crusty, negative person, or I can try to bring some positivity into the world. And the one thing that we all get to decide on and control is our attitude. And so, for me, it was almost a meditative practice of how can I try to make those smaller moments matter and have a better impact. And I recognized that when I wasn't doing that, I would get self-absorbed and involved, and could wander through a grocery store and not notice that I was in people's way or things like that. And I wanted to be a little less oblivious to the world, and in hopes that by just my moving in the world, that could improve something for somebody. And you never know where those ripples will go.
No, you really don't.
You smile, you open the door for somebody, all the way up to you're there for them in a big moment. So
right. Well, I mean, I really look at just how chance encounters end up making a difference too. I look at almost everybody that I've met that has meaning in my life. It just happened to be that I ran into them this way, or I mean, in our situation, you called me because I answered a question, and we had conversation. Then we've had many conversations since then, and built a friendship on the fact that it was just that it was a chance encounter. Of I really don't think that our lives would have ever crossed had you not called. You know what I mean?
Exactly, and like my time living in La Crosse and with you were a pivotal person with that because of everything that you just said. I had a couple of other people where I met folks, and it was one of those moments where people dropped into my life who might not have otherwise done so because of the position that I was serving in and the serendipity of it. And I learned what was possible if I let my guard down, slowed down, and didn't, was not always expecting to be beaten, right? It's like there was part of me that was always expecting to like with new interactions or new people, there was this anxiety about, are they going to be mean or, and so like when I finally like worked and got healed the pieces around that, where it was like, okay, no, I'm going to get over my fear. And even if I'm afraid, I'm going to still go and I'm going to do this and engage. Like I was finding that it was really incredible, those moments to connect with people where they didn't fit the stereotypes that I might have brought into my head, and then they were just really engaging. And you were one of those. I've really appreciated the way that I've learned to converse because of your willingness to be present in conversation. And so connecting with you and a few others really kind of led me to this place of what would be possible if we could say, okay, we need to slow things down, and we need to figure out how to talk to one another. We need to figure out how to have interest in talking to one another and listening and not just being heard.
Honestly, Jackson, I feel the same way. I mean, because I had no idea. I mean, the stuff that we've talked about on my radio program and sitting down drinking beers and just BSing over lunch is stuff that I had no idea who to even ask or who to, you know what I mean, to answer some of those questions. And I do appreciate you as well. And I think that just that communication piece has opened up the doors for, I think, a lot of people to see in and to understand a little bit more. I know that with my radio program, I had comments afterwards with people saying, I had no idea that was a struggle. I didn't realize that, that somebody had to deal with that, or that people are such a-holes that they would, judge somebody without even having conversation with them before. And I believe I probably fell into that too. And like you said, with the conversations that we've had, and maybe the whole stereotype thing, I think I probably had a stereotype that I thought of, when before we met, but then after we met, I'm like, no, man, you're a good person, and
right.
And I think that's just something that a lot of people need to open up and to see, I guess, is to have conversation. It starts off with a hello. I mean, it really truly does. I think that the first step in a positive ripple is to say hi or to smile or, hey, how you doing, and actually listen and care about that person's answer rather than the half-assed, hey, how's it going, and then not caring and just keep on walking.
Absolutely.
Respect and loyalty is something you have on your website under your personal principles for being human. And I think that that's something that a lot of us, and I say us collectively, don't have. I mean, I think so many people don't have respect for their fellow man. I don't think that people have respect for themselves. I don't think that people have respect for our communities and our environment. How can we build that respect and loyalty back up?
For me, the building respect is that's kind of a personal piece, because that is a meditative practice in some regard, because we critically control our attitude. And I'm not saying I respect everyone or I even like everyone, because we're human beings and we're all different. And we all move in the world differently. But the idea of respect is when moving into a space, especially if I'm engaging somebody I do not know, there is no way for me to work to be other than to try to be respectful in the beginning, to try to understand, to go into that, because just respect is a human being, right? The respect piece is something I'm still trying to work through, because there are a lot of human beings who have done a lot of really disappointing things. And so it's like, okay, where does the respect piece, because at some point you can obviously lose respect for people. And I can only talk about this for me. And this for me is an exploration, because it is, okay, what is the tipping point? I should come into all situations of respecting human beings, but at one point, do I get to give myself permission to disengage from the person because we're not connecting in a way where we can have mutual shared respect? It kind of goes back to what I said in the beginning. If somebody is coming to me just to fight, they're not showing me respect. So at that point, I'm walking away. But I'm trying to maintain an ethos so that I keep the door open. And if there's an opportunity for the two people to walk through the door or to connect and meet in a respectful space, then that is my desire, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. And I'm just going to say we're both big men. I don't think we'd both be able to fit through the door at the same time.
Well, I'm like that. And I was like, that analogy doesn't work, because if you're coming from two different directions, yeah. Anyway.
So, Jackson, the final question I want to ask you is this. So what is creating positive ripples mean to you?
For me, it's just a way of being in the world, and it's an ethos that I have, and I really can't imagine a world if you have a lot of people who are really focused on the smallest of actions and what they represent. The more people we have focused on that, I think that is what moves the dial on every issue that it impacts us. And we take a lot of power and control away from people when we slow down and start to have those conversations and start to listen to one another. Because then we don't have people off in the distance, riling you up and spinning you up into a place where you can't even think or engage. Without it being emotional or vitriolic. And so I really think about this as this personal engagement and desire to reflect on the moment-to-moment ripples that we're creating, so as to eventually, create a more compassionate reality for all of us.
How do we join the revolution?
It takes nothing to join. It's just a personal commitment. And if you want to be part of the conversation, we have both a Facebook group so that we can have conversations there as the group builds. And then the website is CPR Revolution, CPRrevolution.org or CPRrevolution.com.
You have them both?
Well, I do have them both so that they're both pointed to the website because I didn't want people to get confused or.
Absolutely. Jackson Jantzen, thanks a lot for sharing your story with us. The CPR Revolution, you can be a part of that, cprrevolution.org or cprrevolution.com. You can join their Facebook group. Also, follow them on Twitter. The BSing with Bob Schmidt podcast is brought to you by Orange Computer. Find them online at orangecomputerlax.com.
This has been another podcastforhire.com production.